we've been talking about, educating the client,
Yes.
the end users here. Is anyone talking to the contractors and the agency workers, or the temporary workers, shall we say, about what all of this regulation might mean for them?
I think we're trying to, but again, the workers themselves, reflecting on some of the previous cultural comments, they see themselves, doing the job, getting paid, and really that's the extent of their exposure or interest. So I think they'll worry about it on the 2nd of October. I'm not sure they'll worry about it on the 1st of October. It's all us in the room in the supply chain world that are worried about it in terms of the risk for the end client and so on. And I would just reflect that the workers will be interested, but it will be segmented in different types of environments where you've got a propensity for lots of lower end paid blue collar workers who might be agitated to be bothered about it by stakeholders slash unions, and that might be where some of the noise comes into the public domain, because I don't, in my time in doing this, we don't tend to get any kind of major news coverage as a topic, but AWR actually made it into the FT recently, so there is a little bit of traction there to get some noise out, I think, so it will be interesting. But the professional end, worry about it when it happens.
I think there's just a couple of things I'd like to sort of pick on what Stephen said about umbrellas, looking for ways around it. I think what you said is absolutely correct in relation to it's a client thing, because if you have a major client who's dictating the rate that they're going to pay, then we know the margins the agencies are operating on. My question is, well, who's going to pay if there is a comparator that's on £8 an hour as opposed to somebody who's on £6.50 an hour as a temporary worker? Who's going to pay? If you say to the clients, well, who's going to pay? Let's work out our comparator, shall we? So let's raise the £6.50 rate to £8 for this guy, shall we? And they'll go, do what you want, because we're not going to pay. You're going to have to find a way to deal with it. So then the agency then says, well, either I'm going to implement a travel scheme to set off expenses against taxable pay to save national insurance contributions, or I'm going to find an umbrella who will do it for me. So it's all being driven, this AWR is all being driven from the client. And it's until we get the major supermarkets in the agricultural sector, or the major clients that agencies actually supply labour into, fully understanding that this is what needs to happen, then we are going to find umbrellas and agencies looking for ways to mitigate costs. Otherwise, they'll just go out of business. And the future of the temporary labour market will disappear. Now, I've got a view that the AWR kind of only applies to the lower end of the market, because invariably you're not going to find your computer sort of engineer sort of making a claim for sort of comparator rights, because he's probably on more money than the actual comparator. So it's going to be in your lower end of the market, and it's going to be led by claims being made by individual workers. Those claims will have to be through employment tribunals, and we now know that the regime change in employment tribunals is going to mean that you're going to have to deposit some money in order to make a claim. So my question is the AWR going to be a bit like the managed service company legislation? There's going to be a lot of noise around it. There's going to be a lot of propaganda put out by various parties about it, but actually nothing really is going to happen in relation to prosecution, in relation to change. It's something that's just going to evolve, because a lot of it should already be there. But transfer of debt was a major issue around managed service company legislation. Now, I mean, around this table you may know different, but haven't been many high-profile cases where somebody has been asked for an awful lot of money as an agency or a client in relation to transfer of debt. But how much noise was made in relation to what would happen? And therefore, my view is that this government is very clever and the Passion, and the Treasury, if you want to call it the Treasury, has been very clever in issuing propaganda to self-regulate. And I think that that's what will happen. People will be looking for it, people will be raising rates, but I think, invariably, I think it could well be one of the biggest red herrings ever to hit the statute books.